Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology, only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com. Hi, everybody. I'm David Rhodes, Editor-in-Chief of Fire Engineering Magazine, and welcome to another episode of In the Books. I am joined today by Jada Hudson, who wrote Firefighter Emotional Wellness, How to Reconnect with Yourself and Others. Jada's a licensed clinical professional counselor with special training in pediatric death and post-traumatic stress disorder, and a certified alcohol and drug abuse counselor. She served as the clinical director of program development for the Illinois Firefighter Peer Support and was a clinical consultant for Operation Shattered Stars. Jada currently works with first responders in private practice in Illinois. Jada, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chief.
Awesome. And I think recently you've started with a couple of departments doing some of their peer support stuff and counseling.
So I'm going to be on staff with two local sheriff departments here, and just kind of working on wellness issues with them, doing mental health check-ins, doing some therapy with them, debriefing. So it's a really interesting new position, and I'm really excited about being on board and helping to create it. I think it's going to be really good for the Sheriff's Department and the State's Attorney's Office. I'm going to be working with prosecutors too. So I'm super excited about, just kind of developing that at the ground floor.
Cool. And you're, if I remember correctly from the book, your father was in corrections?
Yeah, my dad, one of his many jobs was a correctional officer for Stateville Prison here in Illinois, which is a maximum security prison. And back when he was working, there was a lot of stuff going on there, lots of riots, and it was in the 70s and 80s. So he didn't really talk, like most first responders, he didn't really talk much about what was going on there. But
right. So that kind of set the tone for your affection for those in the public safety sector, I guess.
So growing up in a first responder family, I didn't really think of it as, a thing, I guess. It was just the family I grew up in. And I didn't seek out working with first responders because of it. But I didn't shy away from it either. So my first experience working with first responders was for our Illinois state prison system. And I just saw a job opening and applied. And I think this was before a first responder specialty was actually a thing. This was in the late 90s. Right. I don't think very many people had a specialty like that, but I didn't shy away from it. And I think a lot of therapists would be like, yeah, I don't think I want to go to all the state prisons in Illinois and go and counsel. Yeah. But having public safety in my family, I wasn't scared of it. And I was like, sure, I'll go. And so that was my first experience with first responders.
As you got into it, did you start thinking, oh, I'm remembering some different things that happened, and this could be possibly, I guess it's more of like a perspective, you're looking retrospectively at some things and you could relate to them a little differently?
Oh, absolutely. Just like most first responders, I think many first responders feel like their experience is very unique. And that's what's so wonderful about peer support and everything. They feel like, wow, like you feel that way, I feel that way too. When I really started heavily working with first responders, I definitely got the feeling from them that, like, oh my God, you get me. Like, I can't believe it. And then I also, in turn, started hearing a lot of stories that I was like, wow, that's just like my family, like, so I also, it was very reciprocal. I kind of like, maybe, there are some commonalities in this first responder world of how people, handle stress but like, I was just like you guys. And I thought like, well, my family is extremely unique. I was like, no family's like this. And then I started hearing all of the other first responders and I'm like, oh, it's not that unique, so.
Yeah. Well,
it was that feeling of, I get you, and this aha moment, I would say, working with first responders.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true because I picked up the book probably about a year ago, and just looking at the title, Firefighter Emotional Wellness: How to Reconnect with Yourself and Others, I was kind of initial. I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be a touchy feely. But I want to see what it's about. I'm in this new position and all. And as I started reading, I was like, okay, has this woman like followed me around? And because I was relating to different stuff and I haven't had any like major issues or anything, but it was getting to root issues of why this, why that, but it wasn't done in a way that, like, not everything's bad. I mean, a lot of these experiences can be good. Like when you get into the traumatic growth, I mean, everybody needs adversity in their life to get better and all. So, I tell you, I kind of got hooked into it and pulled in, and I was actually screenshotting different stuff and sending it to guys that I knew would either appreciate or needed to hear certain sections, and I think this is a great, resource that a class could be built for recruits even that could follow a curriculum out of this book. And like, every new person coming into the job could be equipped with the knowledge of, hey, this is kind of some things that's going to happen and how you could possibly deal with them. Or really, I guess the big thing is let's prevent it on the front end if there's going to be an issue. So let's prevent it versus having to tie up the resources to treat something that comes along. So I think that awareness at the entry level of the job would just be a phenomenal thing to do. So you start out with reconnecting, what it means to be emotionally well. So what does it mean to be emotionally well?
Well, it means, connecting with yourself, right? First and foremost, connecting with your family, and having really good self-care because, at the hallmark of PTSD really is this disconnection. You're disconnected from other people, even if it's not full-blown PTSD, even if it's just trauma and stress, right? You start to, isolate. You start to feel like no one else is going to understand. You start to dissociate from trauma. Maybe you're afraid of getting in arguments with your family, so you kind of like isolate from them. And there is such a thing, when you are very traumatized of feeling like outside of yourself and like you're just watching a movie, very dissociated, that the reconnection process is getting back to feel whole again, because so much of firefighting is putting, stuff on a shelf for another time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a terrible call. And I'm really stressed out, but I'm not going to think about that right now. That'll be for later because I'm really busy right now. And so that stuff always catches up with you, So.
Yep. So you talk about the firefighter support web. One of the things that I've talked about is with a few things that had happened, over my career. I always talked about how I had a good, strong family life that was from parents to good marriage, kids, all of that was strong. And I do kind of keep that separate. Like I wasn't the guy whose family was coming to the fire station every weekend or whatever. And I didn't really talk about the fire department when I came home too much. They knew, kind of like you were saying, you knew what your dad did. My kids knew what I did, but I was probably more seen as the weekend pancake guy than I was, firefighter, even though they knew that was what it was. Then I had involvement in groups like smoke divers and these instructor groups, FDIC. And I had multiple support groups so that if the fire department let me down in one area, I wasn't devastated because it was just kind of like, oh, well, I'll put my efforts towards this a little more. Maybe I withdrew from where I was taking some heat or having issues, but it didn't really slow me down and cause me issues. So I think that's something that I just learned through the school of hard knocks is like, it's so critical to be engaged in multi different things other than just your station or your department. So, what do you say about that?
Absolutely. I think just a lack of friendships in general in the fire service. Um, I think that it's very hard, and I'm going to say, I think that men have a harder time with this. It is building those friendships. They're a little bit less, or I guess they're just not as assertive about, reaching out and connecting and getting friendships. I've had a lot of guys say, I'm not going to ask a guy on a man date, because I suggest, so like, why don't you, see if you can go to breakfast or, reach out. I see a lot of very lonely guys as a therapist, especially guys that retire. And they need that support, but everyone's sitting back waiting for somebody else to call them. And I mean, it makes me want to like set up like almost like a matching service for retired firemen to like get, because everyone is sad. Like, I'm kind of diving into retired guys because that's what's coming to mind about this. But it also happens with guys on the job. They're just very lonely and sad that they worked their whole entire career for this department and felt like it was family. And then they retire and it's like nothing. They don't hear from anybody. So to your point it is important to reach out to multiple areas for friendships, like, high school friends and like neighborhood friends. And that's very important. Because you're going to need those friendships later.
Yep, absolutely. You talk about rescuer depression and the unique kind of depression that first responders develop.
Yeah. That is about keeping really busy, right? That's about, so when you normally think of depression, most firefighters will think of somebody who's completely shut down, somebody who can't get out of bed, who can't function. And that's really more of like a clinical depression, a major clinical depression. And I don't see firemen too often that have that. They are running away from depression as fast as they can. And so if they start to feel that little bit of an uncomfortable feeling, they will get very busy and they will keep themselves so busy in terms of, the tasks to forget whatever's going on in their life. But eventually it'll catch up and they become like very overwhelmed. And then it could catch you when you're vulnerable. Like, it could be that one call, right? That could actually put you over the edge. But really it's all the other things all along the way that were not dealt with.
Right. And that's definitely, yeah. And you definitely see, and especially from my side doing the training and all, is there are a lot of guys that are, you wonder, like, how do we have time to do all this stuff? Like, you're working the shift, so you're working 24/48 or 48/72s, whatever your schedule is. They're usually doing some part-time work, whether it's for another department or for their own business. Then they're running these little training companies and they're teaching all over the place. And so it actually, it work can almost be a drug, right?
Oh yeah, it can be, because every time you accomplish something, you get like a little secretion of dopamine. Like it's like the reward system. Every time you check something off your list, and it feels good to be accomplished, right? It
Right.
feels it's valued in this society too.
I always worried about the guys that, and I actually, somebody asked me this the other day. They said, "What advice would you give to a new guy starting in the fire service?" And I said, "Don't get a part-time job doing the same thing." And so these guys will work 24-hour shift, and then they'll go work another 24-hour shift at another department. And it seems okay. And I guess the younger you are, maybe the less impact it has. But do you think that that's sort of a cumulative effect that over a period of time, I mean, it's just too much? You would be better off.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying don't be aggressive and don't be a hustler or entrepreneur or whatever, but like too much of the fire station, or even more so like an ambulance, with the burnout of the amount of calls. And some guys will do 24 at the fire department, then they'll go do 12 or 24 on an ambulance. And it's like eventually it's too much and your exposure is a lot.
A long time ago, I went to a training on PTSD before it's really been highlighted in the fire service. And the presenter said the amount of trauma that a first responder sees, and this was like 20 years ago, 20 plus, and in 10 years, they'll start to have problems in 10 years, because that is the mark where it just becomes too much. So then if you think about someone who's adding shifts, to the normal, then you're going to get there faster.
Yep.
I think it's good too I think it's good too, like you said, it's good to have friendships in other areas of your life, like not have just firefighter friends, but have neighborhood friends and such. It's probably the same thing like with your jobs too. Like get a job that's a little something different,
Mm-hmm. Break up the monotony.
Yeah. If you feel that you have to get another job, of course, I would like to see firefighters rest on their days off or spend time with family. But I get it.
And some places, I guess, it just sort of depends on like your standard of living, what you're making. Some departments pay better than others, and
true.
I guess human nature with the personality types of firefighters, it's almost the you see it with overtime. It's so hard to turn down that overtime, and it's like a dog will eat as much as you put in the bowl, right? So you have to be super careful with that, and not. I think the financial side of what gets folks in trouble is, instead of looking at as extra or saving, then they start depending on and living off of that extra income and overtime, and buying that, car that they really don't need, and getting stressed out with the bills. Then you have to do it. You're trapped.
You bring up such a good point. I don't know if you're familiar with an attorney around here named Jerry Marzullo. He's from the Chicago area, pretty well known for labor law. I was running past some ideas past him about peer support for my new position with the sheriff's office. And he's very familiar with peer support. And we were just talking about different ideas of what works with peer support, what doesn't work. And he said, if you really want to help firemen, he's a battalion chief also, battalion chief and an attorney. He said, talk about finances for these young guys, because they're spending way too much money. They get these jobs now that are paying enormous amounts of money in Illinois, at least. And then they're married, and their spouses probably make a good chunk of change too. And then this is like before kids and family, right? And then they get in, over their head, and they're buying many things. And that was his advice: is if you really want to help, talk about money. So
yeah, I guess we can blame some of that on the public education system. I know when I went to school, we actually had to take personal finance, and I think they did away with that probably 20, 25 years ago. But we actually had to create a budget and manage our little fake budget, make investments, and learn how to write checks, which nobody does anymore. And it was good to at least learn the structure of finances and all. And that, I guess, the relationship stress, with your significant other and finances are probably the two biggest root causes of a lot of mental health issues, right?
Well, that's one of the things I look at for suicide. Is there's a lot I look at, but one of them is, does this person have some financial problems?
You talk about what causes first responders need to be needed and trauma, and I know I was in the book, and it started talking about like why people become nurses, why people become firefighters, and there was a section in there about if you look back, they're probably not 100% of the time, but there was always some type of trauma that occurred that made the person want to be a person who helps people and all. And I was like, I'm reading that, and I'm like, I didn't have any trauma. Like, I had a good parents. We did things. My dad was a baseball coach. They're still married, still alive, still have a good relationship with them. My family's been good and all. And then it hit me, and I was like, wait a minute. My best friend got killed in a car wreck when he was 13. I was 14. And this was like not just your friend at school. This was like my next door neighbor that I am with every day of my life from like 3 years old to, 14. And I was like, okay, that counts as trauma, and, he was killed. I was in 9th grade. He was in 8th grade. And, he was killed on New Year's Eve. And, other than, going to the funeral and, talking about it a little bit with some of our other friends, then it just was what it was. It happened, and it was over. And there was no talking to anybody. No, the school didn't rally and have counselors and ask you questions. It was just, man, this sucks, and you moved on. But I think it definitely played a significant effect of me actually pulling the trigger to go into the fire service, because I started out thinking about EMS. And I'm thinking, because the stories were where this accident happened, there was nobody, there was like, a 30-minute response time, before anybody got to them and all. So that's in the back of my mind. And I have to give some credit to the television show Emergency, because that was like one of my childhood things. So, but the combination of that, I really do think that had a significant effect on me choosing to go that route. So, how does that trauma play into your career decisions and personality and so forth?
Well, I think, many times when people have adversity, it brings about a compassion for other people, and feeling that you don't want people, to go through what you did, or you have empathy for others. It definitely, trauma can go like either way. You can have a lot of trauma and become a sociopath, right?
Right.
Or you can have a lot of trauma and then kind of work through that and want to help others on the other end of that. And I think many people in these occupations, not just firefighters and not just police officers, but nurses and teachers and counselors, you have this element that you just have such empathy for others who hurt, and you want to be helpful. It's all part of that post-traumatic growth, So
Mhm.
you come out after working through some things yourself, and you come out feeling like I have something valuable that I've learned, and I want to help other people.
And
So I think,
and that plays into relationships too, because isn't it? I mean, everybody always jokes about firefighters are going to marry a nurse, or it's happens quite a bit. So those folks have probably had a similar experience too, to take them into that field. And I even got thinking about that. I was like, okay, my wife, her dad died when she was 13. And so she went into medical, she went into the medical field. So, there's definitely some science behind how all of that works out. Let's talk a little bit about substance abuse and addiction, and how that can creep in on the first responder.
oh yeah, as I was thinking about what you possibly would ask me, I was thinking, he'll probably ask me like, what do I think are like the worst, most troublesome issues right now in the fire service? And I was going to say booze and women. And I know that sounds very flippant, right? Like
Yeah.
funny. It's not. It's
Yeah.
devastating. Like absolutely, it ruins lives. It
Yep.
is such a terrible problem in the fire service. Those two things, booze and women. So the substance abuse part of it is, it's very encouraged in the fire service still. Mm-hmm. That's how you bond. That's how you relate to one another. And so right there, it sets off the stage. This is what we do. This is what we do in the fire service. And quite frankly, drinking does reduce stress, and it's a good coping skill in the beginning. It's, whatever, it does relax you, takes the edge off. I'm not the alcohol police by any means, but what happens is there's more reasons as you get older and into the fire service, more reasons to drink. If you're using it as a coping skill to make yourself feel less anxious or go to sleep or not get in a fight with your wife or whatever, there's going to be more of those reasons the older you get, right? The more you have children and responsibilities in a house, there's more reasons to drink. So it sneaks up on you. Like at first in your 20s, you go and you party, you have a fun time. Then pretty soon life gets to you're drinking every day. Then, you're drinking more every day because there's more reasons to forget, more things to forget. And after that, so your body becomes accustomed to that. Your whole chemical structure changes after that. Like, I talk about in some of my presentations, there's this like baseline. And then especially if you're somewhat like mildly depressed, when you first drink, you're going to get a little bit of serotonin that's going to make you feel so much better. And then that's within like maybe 20 minutes after drinking. But shortly after that, your neurotransmitters go way down here. And so then a smart, intelligent person is going to say, well, if I drink a little bit more, I'm going to feel like that again. But then it goes way down here. So you're always chasing that feeling that you felt, or you felt just a little bit better. But then over time, the body says, well, he's getting all of this from an outside source. We're not going to make our own chemicals anymore. And so now at this point, you're struggling to drink just to feel normal, just to feel like a human being. And it makes, everything worse in the family, this amount of alcohol. And I don't see too many guys having problems like they might drink a lot, but they're not having problems in their 20s. It's mostly like 30s and 40s where it's become such a problem for them. It's destroying their families. It's destroying their marriage, their work, missing work or DUIs, all kinds of things like that. And it just really isolates. Then they become isolated even more from their families.
Right. I have a friend that was dealing with some issues with that, and we pretty much kind of thought, okay, this guy's probably an alcoholic, and he's headed down that road. Young guy, but in talking to him, and he got some help and has done real good. It's like basically with his therapist and treatment, they were like, you know what? It's like it's not alcoholism is not the disease. It's like you got other issues that are causing you to go to alcohol because you're not drinking every day. You're drinking a lot, but you're not drinking every day as an addiction, but you're hiding, you're masking your feelings or whatever. So I don't even know if there's a name for that, but it is possible that you're not an alcoholic, but you are drinking a lot for other reasons.
Well, it's all about trying to forget uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
And alcohol and addiction, it could be other addictions too. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be drinking every day, because most firemen don't drink every day. They drink when they're off shift. But right. Any single time they're not on shift, they could be binge drinking so much at that point. But it's all the same kind of thing. And it could be an addiction to gambling or pornography, or it doesn't it's just all about, I feel this uncomfortable feeling and I don't know what to do about it. And I don't want to sit alone with this feeling.
Right.
So I'm going to get away from it.
Is there anything that ties in like attention deficit disorder and some of this stuff too? Because I know a lot of firefighters are ADD or ADHD, and they just kind of have that. Does that kind of fall in line with addiction also?
Well, I'm going to say something probably a little controversial, but like, I think it's been overdiagnosed with the first responder population. I would be very careful with that, because there's a lot to be said for all the adrenaline and going on all of these calls and the sleep deprivation, all of that. There's some things that are unique to the fire service that can mimic some of the symptoms of ADHD. So I would, because there's a lot of chemicals that are secreted when you go on calls, So, and those chemicals are also it's going to be hard for, you to focus and pay attention to things. And there's a lot of symptoms that overlap with ADHD and trauma. So I think it's a little overdiagnosed. So I would be careful with that. I think just being in the fire service, though, you have a lot of adrenaline and all of these, cortisol, that you might feel a little on edge. And what's the best thing to do? To have a drink, to feel like, you can like calm down a little bit, right? But that's also a reflection of the job.
Gotcha. Let's talk a little bit about PTSD and the role that leadership plays in that.
Yeah. So of course there's so much with leadership, so many goals you could have in leadership. So this is just one little piece of that, where it's really about, having good relationships and attachments with your people that you're working for. And that attachment in itself can regulate the nervous system and cause someone to have, less of an activation when they go into a call. So like I said, like if this is baseline and this is like full-blown panic attack, right? Having good relationships can like calm that nervous system down. So when you're going into an incident and you feel like I have a leader that cares about me, that knows a lot, that is a resource that you have. Just knowing that's your resource that can actually calm the nervous system down, where you're going to secrete the right type of chemicals. And then even after an incident, there's a lot of research that social support before and after traumatic incidents can reduce rates of PTSD. So I did a lot of research on this through various, like military research, corporate research. I drew from a variety of areas, and I just found it like extremely interesting the more I was digging into it.
So is it safe to say the more toxic environment in the organization, the higher likelihood of PTSD issues within the organization?
Absolutely. So a toxic environment is not necessarily a qualifier or, an incident that is a PTSD qualifier. It doesn't say like when you go to make a diagnosis, does this person have a horrible work environment?
Mm-hmm.
However, I would argue it should be, because if you really think about it, your work is a life or death situation. That's how you feed yourself. That's how you pay your bills. And that is how you take care of your family. And if that is threatened, right, I perceive that as a life or death situation. It does. It gets your nervous system activated, although that would never qualify for an actual PTSD diagnosis. However, if you are in a toxic environment and you have that type of environment where it's like an I gotcha environment, or you have a group of people that don't like you, right? And you're on the outside. We're pack animals, and what happens to that animal that is like left to the side? What happens to him? He gets picked up. He dies. So there is something very basic about feeling like you're in this environment and you're liked and you're well taken care of emotionally. So if you're not, and you have, maybe, your chief doesn't like you, or it's just toxic in general, if this is your baseline where you're supposed to be at, and you're already up here before you went into the incident, and now it's only just a short period where you're in real trouble. So you're going into the incident with your nervous system and your sympathetic nervous system already overreactive. So that is, basically it's a shorter period for you to be in some real trouble. And that has a lot to do with our biology. Like I said, we're pack animals, and we have to feel like we're going into a dangerous situation where people have our back.
Yeah, I know. I've said this several times, and of course, it's based off of my own experiences and conversations with folks. But actually, those toxic environments cause so many more mental health issues than any call that folks go on. And it's almost like the call is sort of the last piece of the puzzle. And I know a lot of folks that like they've been on horrible calls, but they're, they didn't have any issues with them, but they struggled because of the organizational issues, whether it was bad promotional processes or, like you said, the shunning of this group against this group. And that kind of can fluctuate over the course of a career. It's very similar to politics. You're in 1 minute and then you're out the next minute with a change of administration or whatever. So I'm glad that there's being a little more focus on that versus just the traumatic call, because it's easy to blame something on a call. It's hard to look in the mirror in your organization and say, hey, we're actually the root of a lot of folks having these issues. And again, back to prevention. Let's prevent it on the front end. I love this term, and I know it's actually, used in a lot of material, but sometimes I think in the mental health discussion, I'm always worried we go too far in, okay, we can't eliminate all adversity. And, that's kind of a societal thing now, whether it's risk, trying to eliminate all risk and all. You need some level of adversity for growth. And that's, all through your life. But I love the term post-traumatic growth. So Let's talk about that a little bit. That's the positive part of a lot of this.
Yeah, I think we touched on that a little bit with the childhood adversity. And so when you go through hard times, and if you process it the right way and you don't run away from it, these uncomfortable feelings through like alcohol or addiction or just keeping busy, you got to feel some pain though, right? You got to feel all those emotions. Then that really kind of gets to the point of, what do I want my life to be about? What is this life about anyway? Like, why are we here? It's really existential, right? Really, I think firemen, first responders, I should say in general, if they go through this process of this pain, emotional pain from their own personal lives and the calls they've seen, they come out like pretty deep people, pretty deep with like, I guess, and like a goal of what they want their life to be about. They're very intentional about their actions and their time on the other side of all of this. And I think it can go either way, right? You have, let's say, a good percentage of first responders maybe had some childhood adversity. Then you couple that with some bad calls and some trauma. Then there's a fork in the road. And I usually see guys in my office about 15 years on. That's when they've had enough and they're like, help. And they come in my office and there's a fork in the road, right? They can go down the road where they drink themselves silly, where they are keeping even busier. They're acting out sexually. They're, like just going down a really bad path. They're spiraling, right? Or they take a moment, they cry, right? They're really feeling like all of these emotions and trying to figure things out. And they're coming face to face with this. And then they go through this existential process of, okay, time is limited. I see people dying all the time, every day. And what do I want my life to be about? And it usually, most first responders will circle back to family and friends, and that's the most important thing to them, and being available to them and how they want to express that they love their families and they love their spouses. And they will circle back more than likely to that. But it's also about like, what kind of leader do I want to be? How do I want to help the future generations? What kind of person do I want? And they really take a step back and say, life is precious. What do I want to do with this time that I have? And I think they have just a better appreciation for life. And sometimes I hear first responders say things like, I don't want to hang out with anyone that's not a first responder because they don't get me, and they don't get it. And I sort of understand that because
especially on the humor side.
yeah, the humor side, but I also get, when you've been through this process and the general public doesn't go through like all of this death and all of this, this really heavy stuff that stops you in your tracks and makes you think, then sometimes the conversation, I guess, seems silly, maybe, perhaps to first responders. Like, this is what you're talking about? Like, wow,
Right.
I just saw a decapitated, person today. And this really isn't, in the big scheme of life, that important. I think there's an impatience, perhaps, with people that are not first responders. And I sort of get that, because when you've come up, like, on the other end of this process, I'll call it like an existential crisis or something that, or post-traumatic growth, right? Then you may feel like you've outgrown maybe some of the other concerns that other people have.
Yeah, I noticed that, things that would just totally stress my kids or my wife out. I'm like, what is the big deal? It's like, that's nothing. But to them, it's like the most stressful thing in the world. But I'm thinking, if you were just there yesterday and saw what I saw, like, this is nothing. But you can't really say that. You can't say, hey, y'all are worried about nothing, because it is a big deal at that moment in their day or their life or whatever. But it does kind of get hard to relate to some some of life's everyday stresses when you see it's a blessing and a curse, because we see the absolute worst of society, but we also see the best.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting, it's a high and a low and a high and a low, but it definitely gives you a completely unique perspective. And when you hear people talking about issues, whether it's politics or whatever, you just look at it through your lens of what you've experienced. And sometimes it is, I find myself a lot like not getting involved in a conversation because I'm like, okay, they're not gonna understand my perspective on that, but I could talk to some other guys that were in the fire service, and we would be like, oh yeah, so you just kind of agree and move along with their conversations. And you even say in the book, live like you were dying. Reminds me of the old Tim McGraw song.
Yeah, I wrote an article on that. It's my favorite article I've ever written, because I had a lot of guys at one time, firefighters, that would come in and they would have a lot of anxiety about death. And again, this is guys 10 to 15 years on. And even police officers too. Like, they would have some anxiety, either that they were going to die or that their loved ones were going to die. And they would have thoughts. They would have ruminating thoughts. They would have high anxiety. And I pointed out that, this is normal. Like, most people are terrified of death. There's books written, a Pulitzer Prize book that I read is The Denial of Death. And this book says that everything that we do, we're trying to distract from the fact that we're going to die, because we're the only animals. We are the only creatures that know we're going to die. So animals might have fight or flight in that moment when they're being attacked, but they don't know that eventually, no matter what, they're going to die. We're the only ones. So that's the constant awareness that we have. And let's say your average guy that has a different job, they might think about death maybe when their grandmother dies, or have a death in the family, but then they go on their merry way and they try to distract themselves like that's never going to happen. But firefighters, constantly, it's in your face. Constantly, death, death, death. There's no way to deny it. And it sort of breaks down in this book I'm reading now about death. And it basically says that everyone has this, like, it's terror management. All of these distractions we do that we think are so important really are just to distract ourselves from death. And it's called terror management. And so first responders, there's like a breakdown in the management part of it because it's constant. So then if you lean into that, you lean in to, we could all die at any moment. Your loved ones could die at any moment. You could die at any moment. So what do you really want your life to be about? And that's also part of this post-traumatic growth. Like, if you were going to die in a couple of days, like, what are the conversations you want to have? What do you want to say to your loved ones? How do you want to treat your loved ones? Like, if you only had a month left, what would you cut out of your schedule? Are people going to say, like, when you die, oh man, he did such a great job cutting that lawn. Like, he's just great at mowing, they're not, but that's not the most important thing, right? It's going to be about your relationships, what you say, how you conduct yourself.
Yep. And same with retirement. We touched on that a little bit, but that's, I guess, in a metaphorical way, that is a certain type of death. You're leaving one life for another life. And if you don't have the relationships outside of that every day at the station, then you can struggle there as well. A lot of folks, they're like, I hate retirement. Some folks are happy, but the happy ones, you find, it's not that they're sitting at home doing nothing. They have replaced the work with either their hobbies, their passion, but they're on the go. They have freedom and they're looking at it as an advantage. not a deterrent, but some guys really struggle with it. And you sort of see them withdraw. It's almost like you fear going to a nursing home and being isolated into a room. Your house becomes that, and you don't have that interaction. So you got to get out and make the interaction.
Yeah, that's what, I was talking about earlier is me encouraging firefighters to make friends, because, when you're younger, that friendship is structured for you, right? You have a structure, it's easy to make friends, but when you're older, it's hard. You got to put yourself out there. But I think, really when we think about retirement, it's a fairly new phenomenon, right? Like, it's kind of recent. We're in history as a whole that we have a thing where, we have Social Security and all of this. And I think, they found that people that are the happiest people really do want to work and be productive until the day they die. They want to feel like I am a productive person, I am contributing, and I have a structure and I have a schedule. They might not like elements of their work, right? They might not like certain things like a toxic leadership or something else, but so I would urge firefighters when they retire to find something that they have a structure, that they have a passion, that they can control their hours. Maybe they only want to work 10 hours a week, and not, 40, or maybe they want to, do, different types of duties, but it's still important to feel like you're in the game, you are productive, you are passionate about something. And firefighters have a great opportunity, because they retire younger usually, and they have a pension coming in. So that gives them freedom to do something maybe super passionate about, but they don't have to make a whole lot of money. But I think that firefighters should think about this like 5 years before they retire. Like, what is my plan? How am I going to spend my time? And also throughout their career, I love when you said, like, I do have a fire department around here that did buy a book for every one of their new recruits. Because this is something you need to think about early on, because I can give you examples of firefighters that have devoted every spare minute to the fire service and didn't pay attention to their relationships at home. And they retire, it's the saddest thing ever. They're like, okay, I'm ready to travel, I'm ready to have fun now, and they get divorced. That's the highest rate of divorce now is, this older group, like over 50 is the highest rate of divorce right now. And so there's nothing, it's so sad, because like, maybe this firefighter has worked super hard, and in his mind, I'm a great provider, I've done wonderful things for my family financially, I put my kids through college, but basically you have that wife that's saying, so long, because I don't even know who you are anymore. Like, it's too late because you're a stranger. And so now you have this guy that's like lonely, right? He's lonely. His heart's broken, right? Because he thought that money was connecting them all along. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of things to think about with retirement. There's tons of things. You have to have friendships. You have to have a plan to keep yourself occupied. You've got to pay attention to your relationships all along that road. So, yeah, I've done a lot of, and I've talked to a lot of firemen that are retired, and I ask them, like, what would you tell the new guys? And they say, don't get involved in every single little thing, like the dive team and the honor guard and this and that. Save some of that time to connect with your family.
Yep. That's always been a running joke in my circles, is that for a man in the fire service is like, the ones who are super passionate about the fire service is the other woman. That's, because it's occupying your time, and it's tough. I remember my wife, me being involved in smoke divers here in Georgia, and that's about 3 weeks a year of actually being away that we're not getting paid for. It's all a labor of love. It's a give back to the fire service thing. And it was like, how come you don't get paid for that? Like, why are you doing that? And it's not that she was looking for the money, but it was like, why are you taking that much time to go and do that on top of everything else? And so that was where it's the other woman. it's the other woman. And I guess, in a good way, it's good you want people that have the passion for the job, and there's tremendous benefit in that, but it's important to learn the balance early. Like you said, and you're not going to get it 100%, but at least if you heard it in recruit school and maybe had some people come in and tell their experiences and what flipped the light switch for them, I think as they start experiencing it, maybe they would recognize, okay, I'm going down this rabbit hole here that I might not be able to climb out. So it's all about balance, really. It's not that you can't be into the fire department, or you can still be on the honor guard, but like you said, you can't do everything and you can't be gone all the time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think like you said, it is important. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to be excited about your career and passionate about your career. Not everyone is. So it's a great thing, but pick and choose wisely. Because I mean, I've heard stories. Once you get in, sometimes you can't get out. It's like they won't let you back out of these duties. So it's kind of like, start to pick and choose maybe a couple of things of your special interests, but avoid, saying yes to everything, because, they won't. Sometimes the department,
the department will always let you. Yeah, they'll work you to death. Yep. Well, any final thoughts on the book or any projects you're working on that's coming up?
Oh gosh, well, I just appreciate so much the patience, and writing this book it was a very difficult process for me, and you guys are very patient, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to get all this information out in one place. The book is really just a compilation of all of the presentations that I do, and I was very naive about it. I thought, I'll just put all this research together in one place. It was, much more difficult than that. But I just appreciate getting all my thoughts out in one place. And I love, presenting for you guys, and getting, I guess, other firefighters, listening to some of these thoughts, and maybe getting more conversations going. And every presentation I do, I always learn too from you guys, because I'm not a firefighter. So I learned, like this last presentation, the PTSD and leadership, I learned a lot about different trainings and different training techniques from all different kinds of departments, large and small. And I always find that so interesting. But yeah, so I am a therapist. That's my love. And I work, one-on-one individually with clients in my office 30 miles from Chicago. That's my true passion. So, I enjoy very much working with you guys. And I would love to see, parts of this book as a curriculum. So that's kind of what I'm looking towards next.
Awesome. Well, I think it's, definitely a benefit to public safety that we have recognized that there's differences in some of the issues that we face versus just the general population, and that we do have this specialization. Now, obviously, there's some common threads across emotional wellness, but if you go to someone that doesn't have that background, you may not really get the same perspective of the care that you really need. You need somebody that specializes in this public safety field that has studied, and I'm sure it's a lot of crossover in military and all of the public safety fields. So thank you for being a part of that. Yep. All right. Well, it's Firefighter Emotional Wellness, how to reconnect with yourself and others. And like I said before, it was sort of difficult to put down. You're gonna relate to a lot of stuff. You're gonna learn a lot about yourself and why you do certain things, and it's a great resource for other people that you know that you'll want to share the information with. For any of you training chiefs that are out there that are in charge of your recruit class, really consider adding something to your curriculum about this, and this book would be a great place to start. Just as simple as providing the book for your recruits would be a first step. But I think it's important that we get on the front end of this, and let's put more time in prevention than treatment after the fact. And it's been a pleasure to be with you today, Jada. Look forward to seeing you soon. And this is David Rhodes for Fire Engineering, and this one's in the books.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com.